This move puts almost 1 billion people at risk. And I'm talking about a big risk. Now, there's a lot of things going on in the world today and a lot of things that you should be aware of. Some that affect you directly and some that affect you indirectly. And depends on where you're at in the world, this is going to affect you one way or another, either directly or indirectly. And it's something that you need to be aware of. And it's going to affect 1 billion people. What am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about moves that the global leaders, the central planners of the world, are using, what they're doing, that have disastrous outcomes for people, even you and I, depending on where we're at. So what are we talking about? Let's take a look at this article that just came out today. It's incredible. I can't believe they even do this. Well, I guess I could believe they do this. And so have you heard the term gaslighting? So gaslighting, I didn't look up the story. It came from a play where a husband was trying to play tricks on his wife. The lights were coming on, the gas lights were coming on, and he kept telling her they weren't coming on, and it basically drove her insane. What she was seeing wasn't real, and it drove her insane because she knew she was seeing it, but he kept saying she wasn't seeing it. And so when we talk about the term gaslighting, we're saying that the mainstream media or the politicians, the leaders, etc., are basically telling you what you're seeing is not real. And that's kind of what we're seeing. So inflation is bad. It's a problem. Prices going up to levels that we can't afford. Gas prices, food prices, etc. And it went from it's not a problem to, well, it's a problem, but it's going away, to, oh, shoot, it is a problem. We do something. And now it's, well, it's kind of a good thing. And that is continuing the more that we look across the things. And this story that we have today takes the cake, at least for now. I hate to say things can't get worse, but let's take a look at this. This is from the United Nations, the UN, peak centralization, if you will. And look what they're telling us here. The benefits of world hunger. That is a good thing. We sometimes talk about hunger in the world as if it were a scourge that all of us wanted to see abolished. So that's a good thing. We used to look at hunger as a bad thing, as something that we should get rid of, but it's actually a good thing. The benefits of world hunger. It's easy to say that when you're sitting in your ivory tower with your leftovers on your plate that you're throwing away in the trash can because you couldn't eat them all. But how are you going to tell that to millions, hundreds of millions, potentially billions of people that are literally dying of hunger? And they're saying it's a good thing. The benefits of world hunger. I can't believe they're saying this. Let's take a look at this problem and let's see what they've just done, what they're doing right now that's only making this worse. So we can see here from this article in The Guardian that global hunger toll soars by 150 million as COVID and Ukraine war make their mark. So it wasn't COVID or the pandemic. It was the response to COVID and the pandemic that's caused the problem that we're in. It's not necessarily Russia wanting Ukraine that's causing a problem. It's the response to Russia and Ukraine that's causing the problems. It's the central planners that are continuing to cause these problems, and they don't care because they're not affected. But let's take a look at this. The number of people going hungry in the world has risen by 150 million. The food crisis sparked by Russia's invasion of Ukraine risks pushing the worst hit countries into famine. Again, this isn't about Russia. It's not sparked by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. It's the response to it. Now, I'm not going to weigh in on that specific instance. I'm not for any nation trying to take over another nation and killing people. I'm definitely not for that. But let's just say, hypothetically, that I'm over here in the United States. Do I really care if Russia takes Ukraine? Let's say that I'm one of these 150 million people that are going to probably see my children starve to death because of this problem. So if Russia would have just taken over Ukraine, there probably would have been hardly any disruption to the food supplies. But because now this war with the United States and NATO is dragging it on, now it's gotten worse and worse and worse, and now this problem could stretch out years. And so for these 150 million people starving to death, do they want to drag this on, or would they rather get it over with so they can get their food? These are tough questions to answer. It says globally, the number suffering from chronic undernourishment rose to as many as 828 million last year, almost 1 billion people. There's not even 8. There's about 7.8 billion people in the world today, so 1 billion out of 7.8 billion. It's a big number. 3 times, that number increased 3 times if measured since the world shut down due to COVID. So now back to the pandemic. It wasn't the pandemic, it was the response to it. So it's gone up by 3 times, 300%. since the pandemic. Why? Well, you force people to shut down their farms, you force people to shut down their factories, you force people to shut down their food distribution, their supply chains. You shut all of that down. It's not just like a light switch you can just turn it on and off, right? People were fired, people were laid off. Now they don't have enough workers. Now they can't train new people. And the problem just gets worse and worse and worse. So it's gone up 300% since the pandemic, and now it's only being exaggerated by this Russia-Ukraine thing. And it says, unfortunately, that total is expected to rise even further in the next year. Quote, there's real danger these numbers will climb even higher in the months ahead, said David Beasley, executive director at the UN's World Food Program. So it's in real danger that these numbers will climb even higher. Some analysts that I follow are saying that we would probably see 1 billion people starve to death in the next 24 months. I hate to report this, but you need to see what's happening right now. I'm about to show you some policies that are still going into place right now that are only going to make this problem worse. It says that the result will be global destabilization. So that's why this is going to affect you either directly or indirectly. There's going to be, the result will be global destabilization, starvation, and mass migration on an unprecedented scale. So look at what's gone on in Europe with mass migration. Look at what's happening in the United States. In Texas, as a matter of fact, they're trying to invoke Article 4, I believe, and basically declare it an invasion. We have all these people, migrants coming up from Central and South America. Same thing happened in Europe. So this is going to affect you directly or indirectly. You need to know about this. Now, what's important to understand is it says in 2015, the UN vowed to eradicate hunger by 2030. They vowed that they would eradicate it, the Central Planners. But they did that in 2015, so was that 7 years ago. The problem has only gotten worse since the Central Planners have gotten involved, not better. Of course, that's what central planning does. Now, what is it that they've done that's only making this worse? Well, at a time when we have more people going into hunger, almost 1 billion people, and the UN is projecting it to get even worse, wouldn't the goal be to get them more food and not less? I mean, that's what I would think. Of course, the UN wants to tell you that it's a good thing to have hunger in the world. But here we have in Holland, the Dutch farmers say no to EU climate move to shut down the farms. So in order to save the world from a climate disaster of potentially the seas rising by 3 feet and the temperatures rising by 1 degree to 4 degrees over the next 100 years, let's just shut down all the food today. How about that? That sounds like a good idea. And we can see here Dutch farmers are furious in a fight for survival. The Green politicians attempt to shut down 30% of the nation's livestock supply, allegedly to stop nitrogen pollution. So the Netherlands, it says here, has 100 million heads of cattle, pigs, chickens, and is a major exporter of meat across Europe. So the Netherlands is a massive food exporter. They produce a massive amount of food that gets exported to the rest of the world. And the rest of the world desperately needs more food. But the climate alarmists are now shutting down the farms so they can't produce any more food. At a time when we need more food, not less, they want to shut it down because potentially the temperature could get 1 to 4 degrees hotter over the next 100 years, and we might have to use an extra air conditioner. So let's just go ahead and have 1 billion people starve to death today for something that we may be able to prevent in the future. I don't know if that trade-off is worth it. You can leave me a comment, let me know what you think. But let me show you the impact of this. All right, so here we have food riots in the Arab Spring. If you're not familiar with the Arab Spring, this was about a decade ago. And it says, in early 2011, the world witnessed an unprecedented wave of political uprisings in the Middle East known as the Arab Spring. So you need to understand your history to understand where things are going. And we can see that it says that the people demanded the toppling of their regimes along with freedom, equality, and bread. And bread. They wanted to eat. They wanted freedom and equality, but they wanted just bread. They weren't even asking about steak. And it says most of them plunged into an all-out civil war that still plagues the area to this day. So when they went hungry, humans, we can go through a lot of punishment. We can go through a lot of stress. But when you can't eat, when you can't feed your kids, game on. Like, you'll do whatever it takes. And that's exactly what happened here. And it plunged into an all-out civil war that still hasn't been resolved a decade later. There was one factor unnoticed that had a global impact. Let me turn this off. That had a global impact but affected the Middle East the most. What was it? Oh, yeah, food prices. More specifically, the rising price of grain. So I'm giving you the indicators, what you're looking for here. One factor that had the global impact that affected the most, food prices, specifically the price of grain. It says if you want to predict where political instability, revolution, and coups or interstate warfare will occur, the best factor to keep an eye on is not GDP, not gross domestic product, not what the country produces, the Human Development Index or energy prices. Don't look at any of that, right? Natural gas prices are shooting through the roof. Now, it is something to look out for because we need the natural gas to make food. But anyway, it says don't look at GDP, don't look at human development, don't look at energy prices. If I were to pick a single indicator, economic, political, or social, that I think will tell us more than any other, it would be the price of grain. The price of grain. So if we take a look at that, now we can see what they're saying here is that we're expecting things to be worse than the Arab Spring, right? The UN is warning 49 million face famine. Now, just to show you, this is happening right now, right here today, right in front of us. Surging food prices fuel protests across the developing world. This was about 30 days ago. This came out, and let me just show you right here. The war in Ukraine, drought fueled by climate change, has sent global prices for grains soaring. So what was it back here? Look at the price of grain. And so you see here, it sent global prices for grain soaring. European wheat prices have jumped by 52%. That's not just, that's not soaring, that's like astronomical. So what's happening? Well, we have protests around the world erupted over food prices. Argentina, Chile, Cyprus, Greece. I'm not going to go through each of these. Guinea, Indonesia, Iran, Kenya, Lebanon, Palestine, Peru, Sri Lanka, I mean, you name it, Sudan, Tunisia. The world is erupting over this. Now, this leads to political instability. This leads to massive migration. So regardless of where you're at in the world, this will affect you. It's going to reshape the world as we know it. Now, again, per the UN, this is a good thing. The benefits of hunger. That's why they're shutting down the food, because they think it's a good thing. We can see here, if you saw this the other day, the Biden advisor, Brian Deese, says, well, you know, it's all part of the new liberal world order. It's for the good. Now, we see here, Biden war says, will not end with a Russia defeat in Ukraine. They are 100% committed to this, regardless of how many people starve to death, regardless of the collateral damage that happens. Everything in life has a trade-off. There's a cost-benefit analysis to everything. Nothing is all good. Nothing is all bad. There's a cost-benefit analysis. And it looks like the cost-benefit analysis to the war on the pandemic, and now the war against Russia, is potentially leading to 1 billion people starving to death. The war on potentially the world getting warmer in 100 years is shutting down even more food in Holland today. Is the trade-off worth it? You let me know. Leave me a comment down below. If you're not already subscribed, hit that subscribe button. If you like the video, even though I know it was a depressing subject, and I'm sorry, but you need to know these things. I'm always going to tell you what I want to hear if I was on the other side of the aisle. So if you like the video, give me a thumbs up. If you don't like the video, give me a thumbs down, but at least leave me a comment and tell me why. And that's what I got for you today. All right, to your success. I'm out.